All right. So for those of you who missed how to make a rattle, the first thing that you need is you need a piece of rawhide, and while it is dry, you're going to cut the shape that you want of your rattle on, trace it onto the dry rawhide. So I just took a cup. And I traced out the circle, and I put a little knob here for where it attaches to the wood. So you need this little tab, and then I cut it out two identical patterns. So what you want to do is you want to soak your rawhide for an hour or two at you want to soak your rawhide for an hour or two in lukewarm water. You don't want it to be too hot. You don't want it to be too cold. You do want it to be lukewarm water, and you let it soak for 2 hours until it gets soft. And so once it's been soaking in the water, you're going to take your two identical pieces, and if you feel the pieces, there's a smooth side and a rough side. And so you're going to put the rough side on the inside, and you're going to put the two pieces together at first. Once you have the two pieces together, I want you to take your leather needle and a piece of sinew, and you're going to start sewing this. And so pick the bottom corner, and then just take your sinew and go through both pieces. And what I make sure that I do is I leave a little tail about 6 to 7 inches on the bottom. And what you're going to do is you're going to do a whip stitch, which is just your round and round stitch, and make sure that you pull it relatively tight and that you keep your stitches small so that you don't have any big holes. You just go around and around. I like the whip stitch because I can pull it tight. You can also, a really good stitch for rattles is the blanket stitch, and that's the one where you bring it's like the whip stitch, except for you bring your needle through the middle. It is important that as you're going, that you don't go too close to the edge, and that you keep those stitches small and tight. And you do have to pull it tight, because when it is done, you're going to fill it with sand. So I'm going to, and you're going to sew it all around from here and ending here. While you're sewing, you have to kind of do it in one sitting. If it starts to get dry, return it to the water for like 20 seconds and then continue to sew. So I'm just going to pause the video while I finish sewing it and then show you the next step. Okay, I've finished sewing all around my rattle. As you can see, I've kept my stitches small and relatively uniform all the way around from here to here, leaving a tail on both ends. Your final step for your rattle is, what I've done is, now that I've done sewing it, I've returned it to the water so that it's nice and soft again. And I'm going to take a small funnel, and I'm going to take this funnel and put it inside my rattle, just like this. So I put it inside my rattle, and if anyone has taken my history class, we talk about negative stereotypes and how people think that they're a good thing, and they often aren't. But we're going to perpetuate one of those negative stereotypes. We want a nice fat lady who can sing. So you want that. The show's not over until the fat lady sings. Well, we want our rattles to sing the very best, so we want them nice and fat. And we stuff lots of sand in them until they're nice and fat, and there's lots of room for pebbles so that they sing really well. And so as you can see, I'm just slowly filling it and squeezing it until there's no spots left. And to further perpetuate negative stereotypes, I say we want them to sing, we don't want them to shout. Cheerleaders shout, fat ladies sing. I'm sure there's some cheerleaders that can sing, but we want more singing than shouting. So, you know, and you also know my weird humor. At least most of my students know my weird humor, and that I'm not insulting any ladies or any men. We just usually spend weeks on stereotypes and how bad they are, and so and how demoralizing negative stereotypes can be. So I'm not insulting anyone. I'm making fun of the fact that people use these negative stereotypes and think that they are a good thing. So remember to give it a little squeeze so that you get the sand in all areas. You want the sand in all areas, and you want it completely full. It will take a lot of sand to fill all areas of the cup. I find it's easier to use a stick to push the sand down through the holes. It's getting harder to do because it is getting quite full. And so when it is quite full, I'm actually going to take the funnel out, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and force that sand down through. So I'm going to use the stick, and what I'm doing is I'm forcing the sand down through all the corners so that it's staying rounded, and using my stick to round out those corners, the part that the sand has not gotten to yet. And you want to make sure that you do have it perfectly rounded, and you know, just so that your rattle looks nice, especially, you know, fill in those corners, especially if the shape that you did was not a circle. If you're doing a moon or a star or even a heart or a butterfly or a turtle-shaped rattle, you want to make sure that you get all those corners perfectly. So I'm just using playground sand because it's a fine sand and it doesn't have that many pebbles in it. And so once you have, oops, I spilled my sand. Once you have your sand all in and you have as much sand as you possibly can, you're going to take your stick and push it down through your rattle shape. So and I'm going to use these you want it filled in. You don't want any weaknesses in your rattle. So if your sand is all the way through, including up to where your stick is, then there will be no weaknesses in your rattle. And I'm just going to use this extra thread. So how I use this extra thread here is I wrap my rattle around on both ways. Now I want this to dry really tight. So my last step is I'm going to take a new piece of sinew and I'm going to start at the top of my rattle and just wrap it tightly all the way around the rattle so that when it dries, it will dry tight to the stick. And that's what you really want, is you want it tight to your stick. And you're going to, I lay them down flat to dry because when they start to dry, if your stitching was not tight, if it was too far apart, the sand is going to start falling out. So you need to make sure that your sand, your stitches are small, tight, and not too far apart because you don't want the rawhide to separate and you don't want the sand to fall out. So let it dry like that for, I usually leave it for a week. Leave it for a week until it's nice and dry, and then you can take it off the rattle and empty the sand out. There is a video entitled Part 2, Finishing Your Rattle. Video 1 was lost, so I just re-recorded it. Have a great day.